That's a good choice for a guy from my part of the world. That's an in-joke. Very few people will get that one. The situation in Southeast Asia. I was given 13 to 15 minutes to talk about Southeast Asia, and frankly, I could talk for 13 to 15 minutes on an introduction to Southeast Asia. So for my colleagues and friends who are in the audience, forgive me if I skip over big chunks of important things that have been parts of your lives, but there just simply is no way to pay justice to the whole thing in such a short time. Let's look back at the beginning. The two schools of prosthetics and orthotics that really set the profession moving in this part of the world happened in the early 90s in Cambodia and in Vietnam. The building for the two buildings happened a little bit later. Things started a lot humbler in those days, but that was really the kicking off point for the modern profession in the region at that time. Both schools really came out of conflict, and very often across the world in various countries, post-conflict landmines, large numbers of war wounded can often be the catalyst for change in our profession. That goes back historically, and if you plot the development of prosthetic and orthotic technology and services across Europe, you'll see at the end of the First World War, there was a big increase in activity. At the end of the Second World War, the same again. And also in the United States, the big jumps forward in technology came through and towards the end of the Vietnam conflict. And then even today, large amounts of money is flowing into the care of veterans from the conflicts that are more contemporary. So it's not surprising that we started there. And the Cambodian school started in 1993 towards early 94, and I think Viet Cot was around about the same time. Viet Cot was part of a chain of schools started by the German organization GTZ. Mr. Sepp Heim was responsible for the organization, for the planning, and in the case of several of the schools, actually on the ground setting them up. I think his score of school setups is around 7, mine's 5, so he wins by 2. The school in Vietnam exists today and currently runs on as a Category 2 training school, and has been handed over completely to the Ministry of Labour, Invalids and Social Affairs, I think MOLISA. And it's one of the examples of where we find this conflict between the medical model and the social model. In Cambodia, it's similar. The school comes under the umbrella of the social ministry, but yet WHO, at this very stage a couple of days ago, made a big play of prosthetists and orthotists being health personnel and not social personnel. So it swings one way, it swings the other way, and often you find prosthetics and orthotics in one camp or the other, when my conjecture is it should be the bridge between the two, because we deal with conditions often caused by medical conditions, and we provide the equipment and the materials to enable people to get back into social activity. CSPO was my first overseas run, a very long time ago now, 24 years in October. And it became an ISPO recognized school in 1997-98, that term, and eventually moved into a regional role as increasing numbers of students sought places from the surrounding countries. And we started with students coming in from Sri Lanka, originally students that came from the Veterans Rehabilitation Service, and that's where they went. And there are still Sri Lankans doing the prosthetic and orthotic technician course in CSPO today, almost 18 years later. You'll see a picture here of a gentleman from Papua New Guinea. I think the last time we counted, there was 21 nationalities had been through the school. Everywhere as far north as North Korea, everywhere as far west as Afghanistan, and everywhere as far east as the Solomon Islands. It has had quite an influx and continues on in that role. But it's been fully localized since the mid-2000s and is run by a very competent team of practitioners and educators who continue to take their place mostly in the international community, except on the occasions like this when they forget to get a visa. It was the springboard for a regional strategy, and in 2001, 2002, I undertook a fairly major work sponsored by the Nippon Foundation, and I spent a very interesting year and a half visiting all the countries in the region and developing basically quite a thick book which laid out a strategic plan for the countries listed here. That book was published just about the time that the Twin Towers fell down in New York, and there was a period of 3 years where the international community kind of stalled. So nothing happened until 2004 when we established a training school in Sri Lanka. Then, once that was established, 2008 came Indonesia, Philippines in 2011, Myanmar in 2016, but also the same donor group sponsored and supported and continues to support the school in Mahidol University, Bangkok in Thailand. And that kicked off, I believe, around 2005, but if I'm wrong, someone will tell me. So, a little progress report. The pictures here show some scenes from Sri Lanka, and if you look on the top left picture, you'll see a row of shipping containers, each with a sunshade on top. Those were our startup classrooms. That's where it began. And eventually we built a very nice building, very large building, and that's what the school is today. SLSPO was handed over formally to the government about 15 months ago. It stalled slightly, but I was informed last week that a new intake starts the week after next, and they're back on track with a small group of experienced lecturers and an ongoing mentoring support from Exceed Worldwide, the organisation with whom I work. The future of the school is that it's very much integrated into Ministry of Health, and medicine tends to be quite centralised in Sri Lanka, and the majority of graduates coming out of that programme have been employed within the Ministry of Health, or conversely within the Veterans Rehabilitation Service, which is part of the Sri Lankan Army. And there are large numbers of post-conflict wounded, injured and disabled as a result of the 32-year conflict in the north and east of the country. And even to this day, the number of wounded on the government side remains a state secret. In Jakarta, we've got about 1.5 years to go in a 10-year programme where it will be handed over to government. And at this stage, we have a number of students who have graduated, who have undergone a period of clinical practice and clinical mentoring, and some who are now pursuing master's level education at home and abroad in preparation for moving into a full-time and leadership role in the school in Jakarta. That school is also incorporated within the government system. It's under the Ministry of Health, under the Education Department in the Ministry of Health. But like Sri Lanka and many other countries, we see a dismantling of that health education inside ministries of health and more of a move towards normal universities where medical schools, nursing schools and others have moved out of the control of Ministry of Health and as they have in other countries, and sit slightly on the side, and students follow a more of a normalized career pathway. In the Philippines, we're embedded within the University of the East, Ramon Magsaysay, and we're in the second half, the handover phase, where students have been taught, trained. Some in the Philippines have been employed and are now working as P&Os, gaining their very valuable clinical skills. Some went through the bachelor's program in Thailand and have returned. And the program in Thailand has been very important in the region in that it has provided a pathway from Category 2 to Category 1 and has provided that basis by which the next generation of young lecturers begin to be selected and mentored up. CSPO, as we touched on before, remains a Category 2 school with aspirations to move to bachelor's degree Category 1 and will undergo an ISPO consultation later in the year with a view to moving in that direction. It also is the first school in the region to move to a Category 3 technician-only one-year full-time programme. And we're very pleased to see that that's moving forward, and it will also go up for an ISPO accreditation later in 2017. And hopefully we're on track with a curriculum that will match the new standards that are out there. And we can be one of the first to have an ISPO tag on it. Myanmar is quite young. We have not yet graduated a class there. It's a Category 2, aiming to be a Category 2 school, and even though it's a bachelor's program, there are a number of elements there that would preclude it from going up to the professional prosthetist orthotist level, but I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that in the near future it will aspire to go higher. That brings me on to SSPO, the Serendorn School of Prosthetics and Orthotics, which is one of the universities in the region that has embraced prosthetics and orthotics with huge enthusiasm. And that goes down to Dr. Nissarat, I hope she's in the audience to hear my compliment, who has really given a tremendous professional and political push to the whole industry in Thailand, and in particular within this very prestigious university. They're working at bachelor's level. They are Category 1 currently, and I'm sure they will easily meet the standards of the new setup. And they're working very hard on developing one of the first masters in P&O in the country, and which will serve the region. And both Dan and I spent a number of years working with them, and we're very proud of the output that comes from that place. And I personally am very proud to be associated with them, and to those who have worked there. I'm sorry, I meant to mention Vietcot, which we've kind of lost touch a little bit, but is taking part in these other collaborations. We've had a number of attempts to strengthen the profession in the region through collaborations. And for a few years, we ran an organization called APOS, the Asian Prosthetics and Orthotics Schools. And there was staff exchanges, teaching exchanges, experiential exchanges, grants for research, presentations, and so forth. That has now been largely replaced by a new group which met in January for the first time, and it's part of the ASEAN University Network. And a new agenda for collaboration, collaborative research, collaborative teaching, and collaborative development of training material is now on the table and is being worked on. We've been heavily involved in promoting training of trainers. If the thing is going to be sustainable, then foreigners need to go. And I'm very, very happy to see that all of the teachers, apart from one, in the new school in Myanmar, are regional. And this is a huge step forward and something that was unthinkable a mere 20 years ago. And to get that quality up there. Research. There's been a strong theme throughout this week about the need to collect data, I don't know. There's a big push with WHO, a big push with ISPO, and research is beginning to take strength. As I said, collaboration in the development of the education model, and in particular, collaboration around sustainability. There is a skill shortage still of around 3,000 practitioners in the ASEAN region. If we had 3,000 practitioners dropped from an aeroplane tomorrow, there would be no place for them to work. And there's a whole issue of integrated sustainable development and planning. The people from Alarcos from WHO alluded to it very strongly. Chapal alluded to it very strongly. And this need to get the planning integrated so that we have places for people to work, funding, support, technology, and simple things like supply chain in place. There's no point talking about this if you can't get a sheet of polypropylene. It's as simple as that. But often these things are not seen. So our work at the moment is very much focused on sustainability. As an NGO supporting these schools, some within government, some within private universities, we are working very hard at the moment through social enterprise and other initiatives to make sure that this whole thing pulls together, that the evidence is there, the planning is there, the commitment politically is there, and educationally. So what's next? A little picture of the very grand front of the University of Medical Technology in Yangon, which gives us a view of the future in that part of the world. But the future is about connectedness. The future is about making sure that we work together. The future is about deciding whether we need a chicken or an egg. Do we train people or do we build infrastructure? One's the chicken, one's the egg. Which is first? Well, I think we need both. The pressure for the future is how do we maintain the hand skills, the critical skills, the critical competencies of the practitioner. And as universities push more and more for cheap, easy to teach academic subjects, we find more and more that the critical skills of the working prosthetist get squeezed out. These are important. Connectedness, service delivery, exchange, sharing teaching material. And if you haven't received your free copy of the new Atlas of Spinal Orthotics, well, I don't know how you missed it, but check the website. This is a good example of how we work together, we pull resources together, and we create a lot out of very little. I'd like to thank the Nippon Foundation, who committed their support. By the time this is finished, they'll have spent about $55 million on developing the new profession in Southeast Asia. We're coming up this year with ISPO and the University of Melbourne into a six to 9 month period of monitoring and evaluation. And I hope to be standing at an ISPO podium in a couple of years presenting the scientific outcome of what's been invested. So ISPO standards have underpinned us. ISPO standards in Southeast Asia remain the benchmark of quality. And we are fully committed to making sure that the new standards move forward. And it is a pleasure, and even though it's been hard work, to close the circle and return the experience of the last 24 years back around and back into the new standards. And I look forward to working with you all and maybe being hassled by you all as we roll this out in the next stage. Thank you very much.